Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the PBSE Podcast. It's great to be with all of you today. This is Steve Moore and Mark Castleman with episode 301. Great to be in the 300s. We're excited to be here with you. We have a good submission that came in from a partner that, like many of the topics that we talk about specifically in the podcast, you know, every episode it seems that we touch on a whole host of things, and this subject of today is one of those, but one that I don't know that we've done a full episode on before, which, you know, in 300 episodes is kind of saying something. So really grateful for what she wrote in. We'll go ahead and we'll read it, and then we'll jump in. As you can see, the title for today is How Does a Porn or Sex Addict Coercing His Partner into Acting Out His Fantasies Impact Her and the Relationship? So, bit of a doozy. And here we go. First of all, I honestly can't thank you enough for your very honest, real, and straightforward discussing of sexual addiction and the very real and devastating effects of it on the partner. We appreciate that. You have helped me to think and process through so many things. My husband and I are separated after 30 plus years of marriage, all of which he has had a porn and sex addiction during. For most of those years, I tried hard to encourage and even at times press him a little to get help. Any help, just something. So she was aware of this, it sounds like, at least to some degree, for a good portion of the relationship. And I remained hopeful that he would someday, quote unquote, get better. But in the process, denying all the hurt and abuse I was receiving at the same time in order to survive and be present to raise our 3 daughters, whom he almost entirely was disengaged from. He only had time and energy for them in public when his image was on the line. From very early on in our marriage, I felt as though he was not really present with me in our times of sexual intimacy. There was just something missing or lost in his eyes and demeanor. It took me a while to put together the pieces that he was increasingly asking, pressing, and eventually coercing me into acting out his sexual fantasies from all the porn. I felt trapped between wanting to love the man I'd committed myself to and given my whole self to, and wanting to push him away to protect myself physically, emotionally, and psychologically. With each passing year, this damage and hurt grew, and my ability to maintain any sense of self-respect and personal value died. I felt less than nothing to him. Yes, he would tell me how much he loved me and how much he needed me, but the words were void of all sincerity and meaning when held next to his abusive actions. I am now on a healing journey and actively pursuing my own emotional, mental, and even physical health. I have learned so much over the past year that we've been separated. I can't imagine ever going back to that. Can you please talk about the damaging effects of sexual fantasy fueled by porn on an intimate relationship, including coercion to act it out? This is a topic that I haven't heard or seen discussed, but I can attest to the immense damage that it causes. You guys bring such clarity to hard topics. Thank you again.
Wow, that is an amazing and deep and disturbing, heartfelt. There's a lot of adjectives about that submission. And, you know, the first thing we want to say is just how much our hearts go out to this partner and all partners who are faced with, there's way too many in the world today that are faced with this pretty much exact situation.
Yeah.
And as we always say, you partners, you did not sign up for this. You don't deserve it. You didn't cause it. You can't fix it. Right. And I think that's a big part of why this is so painful and excruciating for partners, is because you have so little to do with this. It brings feelings of powerlessness, brings feelings of confusion, frustration, hurt, pain, right? All of it. And we just, our hearts go out to you in all of that.
for sure.
Steve, as we were preparing for this, I don't know that I don't know that I've done a deep dive on this before in the podcast, but when I said you partners did not sign up for this, I had the thought occur to me as we were preparing. Well, what did she sign up for? If she didn't sign up
Mm,
for this, what did she sign up for? And that took my mind back to the beginnings of my own relationship. The courting, the engagement, the marriage ceremony. What was my partner signing up for? What were the spoken and agreed to commitments, contracts, understanding? What was that? And I
mm.
thought it might be good for a minute to talk about what that was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of things, right? And every marriage or commitment ceremony has different components, but it does mean, right, at least on a basic level, certain things, I think, for everybody, right? I mean, first and foremost is and this is probably the most magical part of a relationship is that you have, at least in theory, right, you have two people with their own sovereign, independent agency and thoughts, ideas, motivations, hopes, dreams, personalities, etc., who find one another and use that collective, we would argue, God-given or higher power agency to what? To choose each other. I could be with I could be with anybody. There are lots of people I could choose, but I'm choosing you, right? I want to make a life, a relationship, a family, a world with you going
Yeah,
forward.
I searched and I searched and I searched and I choose you. And now I'm with this ceremony contract commitment. I'm done searching and now we are exclusive.
Yeah.
Isn't that the contract and agreement that every partner enters into?
Yep, I was quote unquote on the hunt before, and now we formulated this commitment, and I'm hanging up my hunting equipment, and I'm now moving into a committed exclusive state.
Yeah,
Um,
we're exclusive. And Steve, I thought of the old traditional marriage ceremony language, and I know it's different for everybody in their particular cultures around the world, but I thought it would be interesting to just recite that sort of common language and what do these words mean, right? To live together in matrimony, to love, comfort, honor, and keep, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, in sorrow and in joy, to have and to hold from this day forward, as long as you both shall live.
mm,
Some pretty powerful words in that traditional statement, isn't there?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, and there are so many things encapsulated right in a commitment like that, and again, for everyone who enters into some sort of commitment like that, there's the ties may be unique, but there are those universal elements, and one of those that we find almost without exception, and certainly this is only done consensually, is the element of exclusivity.
absolutely.
Right, I'm going to be exclusive to you. You come first. This relationship is the priority, and then so we have a relationship that's going along, doing its healthy thing, quote unquote, right? Like relationships are supposed to, and they start, and they begin to deepen in different ways as they're supposed to, just like a plant, right? You plant it in some new soil, the roots start small, but then they start to grow and start to develop. And as that's developing, obviously that's supposed to add strength and stability and all those things to a relationship. But then let's say, like for most, if not all of you listening, because that's why you'd be tuning into a podcast like this, one or both of you violates that agreement.
Yeah.
So that new plant that we formed, that new entity, that really fragile, precious element that is growing and with all this potential, uh, begins to be marred, begins to be scarred um, through different things, secrecy, deception, those kinds of things.
Well, we don't know this, the pornography or sexual addict partner in this submission. But I guarantee that it was one of a number of situations that happened Steve, as you and I have worked with so many guys over the last 20 years, right? Some choose to enter into that sacred contract and agreement that we just talked about, and they don't disclose to the partner that they're bringing what we call a secret sexual basement into the relationship. It existed before, and they have not disclosed it. And they bring that secret sexual basement, those secret sexual behaviors into the relationship. And I'm going to say something pretty bold here. If I knowingly bring that secret sexual basement of mine into a relationship that I'm committing to, and I don't disclose to my partner, I am fraudulently and duplicitously entering into that relationship contract. Right?
Yeah.
It's fraudulent right out of the gate. Some guys we've worked with will disclose part of the secret sexual basement, but not the whole story. Or they'll claim that it's not a big deal, or it's in the past, or I've overcome it. Again, we've got some fraud and duplicity involved in that arrangement. And in others, sometimes it develops after they've entered into the relationship and they create a secret sexual basement along the way and then break the contract.
Well, and one thing that I'll say about that is obviously there are many cases. I mean, we don't use all or nothing a lot in our work. I would say that every guy uh, is concealing a part of their sexual indiscretion if it comes before the relationship begins. And the reason why I say that is not because every guy is absolutely, intentionally deceitful. I mean, speaking for myself, I mean, I went into my relationship with my wife, Brittany, and was actually very open with her about the struggles that I had, the challenges that I faced with pornography and with other things. The problem is I, even as a guy who at the time was in school to become a therapist, was studying mental health, I had no clue about what addiction was, how it worked, the extent of it, how much it impacted a person as well as a relationship could impact a partner. And so even though I didn't deceive her in terms of, here I am trying to hold things back or conceal, I was concealing because there were things that neither one of us knew. Neither one of us knew what we were dealing with, right? Somebody outside of this world of addiction, betrayal, trauma, and everything that it encompasses, looking from the outside in, I don't think there's a way for a person in that to ever go into a relationship and to be and there's no way for that person to be able to actively quantify or for the other person to fully understand what they're getting into. It's not
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. And mine, I had a big pornography addiction issue when I was a teenager. But then when I got into college, I got a good handle on it, got some help, and I was sober for probably 3 years. And I went into my marriage with that sobriety. My wife didn't know about the extent of how much I had struggled as a teen. She knew some of that. And I figured I was good to go. I'm married now. This is all that stuff way back then. That's never going to come back. This is all going to be great. And then about 6 months into my marriage, with full-time school, full-time job, child on the way, all the pressures and craziness of life, and my brain wanted to run back to the way it learned to self-soothe and cope during all my teen years, and it did. And I went right back into that deep pornography addiction, but I withheld that information, that life-altering information, from my wife. And I kept it in the secret sexual basement stealth mode for a good dozen years of our marriage. Right? That's how it happened to me.
Yeah. So this concealment can take many forms, but I think every partner experiences, no matter how quote unquote consensually they may have entered into an agreement or how transparent it was, it's still betrayal.
Yes.
Because there simply is no way to quantify that until one really becomes a part of it.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when this happens, right? What happens when a partner enters into a relationship in this sort of way? Obviously, there are a lot of things that, and we won't spend too much time on this because we talk about this quite frequently on the podcast. But first of all, she doesn't really know the man that she's quote unquote choosing, right? Therefore, true intimacy is impossible. the depth of intimacy in a relationship is always predicated on the capacity for the other person to know the person that they're committing to, right? And the degree to which they don't know them, the degree to which that other person doesn't know themselves, all those things form glass ceilings in the capacity to really choose another person in a relationship or to be chosen, right?
Right.
If
Yeah.
I'm concealing for whatever reason, say 25% of my life from my partner, by mathematical definition, if my partner were somehow completely in tune and connected with themselves and was like the emotional equivalent of Gandhi walking around, what's the connection going to look like in my relationship? At an absolute maximum, it's going to be 75% between the two of us because there's a whole 25% that they don't even know about.
Well, it's often much greater than that, right? We talk about the word intimacy. Into me, I'm going to let you see. Into you, you're going to let me see. And to the degree that I shut that down and I'm not transparent and vulnerable, I am limiting the intimacy that we can experience.
Yeah.
Right? You can't know me, so you can't really choose all of me. And what is this? When we start talking about this, I call it a lack of informed consent. Yeah, my partner's giving consent, but is it fully informed consent? Right? And so my partner said as we got into really good recovery and she started to find her voice and we started to be able to talk really authentically and honestly, and I'd done a lot of shame resilience work to be able to lean in and sit with her to talk about these things. She talked about how much confusion she felt, right? My mood swings, this part of me would show up and out of the blue, this side would come, and I was up, I was down, I was all around. She was very confused. She felt very disconnected. She shared with me later, even though we were married, living in the same house, often sharing the same bed, she felt isolated and lonely. That's a big part of what happens with this.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. No, well, I mean, there's so many components, so many pieces to this, right? But I mean, a spouse feels many things, right, as they go through this. It's very common for spouses, for example, to feel confusion, right, disconnection, isolation, loneliness. She feels objectified and used, and rightly so, because she is, right? Those are true statements, to some degree or another, depending on what is going on in the relationship. There's of course that element of betrayal trauma, right? All of the emotional, psychological, and physical abuse that comes with that, and the complex trauma that happens over time as that pattern plays out
Yep.
again and again and again in the
Trauma gets
relationship.
layered upon itself and layered, right? And we don't have time in this podcast. We've talked about it before, but the myriad impacts of that complex trauma, complex abuse happening over and over and over again. I mean, we could spend, a half a dozen podcasts on what that does to the betrayed partner, right? And I think Steve, as you and I, we've often talked about this. One of the things that breaks our hearts, especially with regard to partners in this, and I wish I could say this wasn't the case with my partner, but it was. I created the situation where she had to betray herself. And why did she do that? She gave in to my acting out sexual fantasies, in our intimacy together, coercing her into different things. She went along with a lot of that because she was trying to go along to get along to do what? To keep our family intact, to raise our kids, to try to continue to encourage me, and God forbid, don't trigger me, right? Don't trigger him, because we got to keep things stable here. And so she would do all sorts of things to keep the peace and for me to be stable. And let's never forget in all of this, she was craving intimacy, true intimacy and connection the whole way. It's not like partners don't have this need to be physically close and physically intimate and sexually engaged in a really healthy way. They do.
Yeah.
And yet how much of that gets distorted and twisted and played on? If I as a porn user am bringing these fantasies into that sacred space and then engaging in different levels of coercive behaviors to get my partner to go along with it.
Yeah.
Huge impact. Hey, everybody. PBSE Podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. Mark and I found ourselves in that place. Messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today. Well, and probably just so that this flows well for those listening, because we know this is not the world's funnest podcast episode to listen to.
No, it's not.
A lot of hard stuff. Since we're talking about the impact, for a partner, we should talk about the impact on an addict before we move to the coupleship.
Yeah.
So kind of skipping ahead a bit, I remember when in my deepest addiction days, one of the scariest parts of being in active addiction and inactive addiction, if you want to say that, even though I'd stopped acting out for a time, for lack of a better term, I hadn't just become, numb or what would be the term, jaded or acclimated to or resistant to not just, normal sexual feelings or normal sexual expression. We talk about that often, how, frequent indulgence in addiction and compulsive sexual behaviors causes that. It removes the ability to really experience, healthy sexual pleasure, distorts the brain in terms of understanding what healthy sexual pleasure even is. But I think it got really scary for me when there was just kind of a loss of pleasure about everything. Life just kind of over time, it was like somebody was, if you're like watching, I don't even know you can do this with new TVs, but back in old TVs, there was this little color contrast dial that you could turn, and the more you turned it, the more the picture would go from color like it normally is, and you could fade it gradually to black and white.
Black and white. Yeah.
And it was like that kind of happened over time, where it got to a point where one day you just kind of woke up and you realized, holy cow, like I'm in life, I'm going to work, I'm going to school, I'm spending time with my partner, I'm having sex with my partner, I'm doing, different things, but it's gradually lost all of it. It's like lost the flavor.
It's kind of become dull. You know,
It's become dull. It's become subdued is a good way to put it.
mhm.
Like not really feeling good, not really feeling much of anything, kind of becoming almost emotionally muted. That was really, really scary.
We talk about how, this pornography use and all the different sexual addiction aspects rewire the brain's pleasure system, the brain's dopamine system, so that what once were joyful, simple, beautiful things about life don't even register anymore
Yeah.
because we've used these fantasies and this extreme content to spike the dopamine system so radically that regular life just doesn't even register anymore. Yeah.
Well, over time, I think most of us addicts, the sad reality is that even though the brain, the prehistoric brain or the midbrain or whatever you want to call it in psychology, is a pleasure seeking organism, as we say all the time. But acting out and recurrent acting out in any addiction, but particularly this one, I would argue, deepens that. And rather than moving towards a balancing of that pleasure seeking nature with, the prefrontal cortex helping us to seek authenticity and truth and what really brings happiness in life, the brain becomes more and more acclimated to and fuels that idea of just being pleasure seeking. We become more affixed to seeking out fun, quote unquote, or pleasure, not satisfaction.
Yeah, you become a pleasure junkie,
Yeah.
sometimes we call it.
Pleasure is in other words is feeling good. Satisfaction in life comes from feeling fulfilled. And there were many things I felt in my addiction days, active addiction days. Fulfillment was not one of them.
Well, and
And I think
another
many of us
another
feel that way.
a big impact also that I noticed in myself, it was one of the things that pushed me into recovery when I started to realize the more I engaged in these sexual fantasies, the more it diminished my ability to connect
Oh
with
yeah.
myself and others. I was losing my humanity. I was losing my ability to empathize. Everything became objects or things that I was going to do things to. And my own body became an object, right?
Yeah.
My body was going to do things to that body over there, parts doing things to parts. And I was just losing my whole humanity and horrible impact on my relationship with my partner, but not just her, everyone. She says in her submission that this guy has been disconnected from his three daughters, their whole marriage.
Well, and this is just, guys, we're just talking about, I know this is super positive and cheery, but we're just talking about the element of the addiction side. We're not even talking about the shame element or
Mm-mm.
the other factors that come into play, which as we talk about on here all the time, just amplify everything we're talking about and add quite a bit to it as well. So, as far as the main attraction goes for today, as if this has already not been super fun, super unfun enough, let's talk about what happens in a coupleship here. When this dynamic specifically, right, where we have an addict or a sexual compulsive who is uh, coercing, bringing into, and placing pressure on a partner to sexually perform, to become pornography, to I I'm giving it a kind of giving it my own term when we pressure a partner into performative porn for us, what happens?
Well, I'll tell you,
What dynamic does this bring?
as you and I were preparing, Steve, something hit me. I don't know if it's quite hit me this way before, but I'll tell you one of the things that I deeply regret in those years of deep addiction when I brought that into the physical, you know, sharing with my wife. I realized that there was a great deal of innocence and beauty that was lost in our relationship because of me.
Yeah,
Because I brought in outside sources, right, of sexual fantasy, pornified this, all the ideas and the positions and the techniques and all the stuff that were brought in from the outside, from twisted, dark sources. I robbed our coupleship of us discovering our own precious and beautiful and unique intimate experience that should have been us discovering and developing and growing that over time, I robbed the relationship of that.
Mm, yeah.
That's tragic.
Abs-
That's tragic.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, and there are so many elements, right, that suffer here. I mean, it's really honestly, it's really difficult to quantify. Um, every element that we talked about before of betrayal that we were talking about a minute ago is exponentially deepened.
Oh my gosh. It keeps re-exploding it every time you come into this situation, doesn't it?
Well, but I mean, even going more deep than that, the objectification, however deeply it runs in other, I would say, addiction attributes. I mean, if we talk Turkey, it exponentially amplifies the objectification of a partner within this relationship. Not only are we objectifying, in these extramarital or extra committal engagements that are dysfunctional. Now we're taking that same logic, line of reasoning, etc., and we're applying it to the relationship. We're
Mhm.
applying it directly to the partner. I mean, it just makes me sad talking about this,
Yeah,
honestly.
Steve, you and I had we created a D2C Academy advanced courses that our D2C people get to participate in when they've been with us for a while, when they have enough recovery and growth to get into really deep topics. We did a 26 module course on healthy sexuality. And one of the things that we talk about in healthy sexuality is when you go into that sexual intimacy realm with your partner, you are treading on sacred ground, because that environment has the capacity to either exponentially put the spotlight on all the good in your relationship, or it has the ability to absolutely be a wrecking experience when you go into that setting.
Well, it's because it's the highest form of intimacy that a coupleship can engage in. We talk about this in the course, but we would argue that the highest form of collaboration that can happen in a relationship is creation.
Creation, yeah.
And we're not talking about just creating other people, which obviously the sex act can do. We're talking about creating a life together, creating a new perspective, a new paradigm, a new family unit, a new everything. And one of those elements, right, and you brought this up as we were getting ready for this, is every partnership goes through such a unique, amazing, special experience when they bring the physical component into the relationship, particularly when the other elements of intimacy have already been worked on and built. And that is this element of this unique, sweet, very intimate, very all of your own, your coupleship's own sense of sexuality, sense of physical intimacy, what that looks like, little quirks, everything from quirks to pet names to little nuances in that physical relationship that are just your own, that are deep and intimate that you don't share with anybody.
Yeah, and we talk about the 8 areas of intimacy. 7 of those are not sexual, and we share with each other in those other 7 intimate areas, and then we come together now physically in the sexual part, and we celebrate and we culminate all those other things that we've shared. But now, what happens when you come to that culmination and celebration place and it's tainted, it's invaded with these outside, fantasy sources that I, as a partner, am bringing in. It Part of it, Steve, and this was true for me and all the guys I work with. He brings a sense of sexual entitlement into that setting if he brings in those outside fantasies and all the porn use. It's kind of a one-up dominance. She's there to service me, which is what pornography teaches, by the way. And so there's this pressure for her to agree, this pressure to perform, to keep things stable, to keep him pleased, as opposed to what? True equality, true collaboration, true sharing, true creating. All of that's all lost in this sexual entitlement and one-up dominance. That's one of the most heartbreaking things, is the true equality and collaboration are gone. Right?
Yeah.
It's not an equal sharing.
No, absolutely. It's completely true. And that it's just so hard to talk about, but that uniqueness to the relationship, you know, we we teach a message of hope at here at PBSE and at Dare to Connect. We're all about repair and the capacity that relationships can be healed, people can be healed, individuals can change and grow and become better than they ever were, and that is true. There are certain elements, Mark talked about innocence lost a minute ago. There are certain elements, though, that are collateral damage in this process that tragically cannot be brought back. And this in that innocent stage where a couple is building out that relationship that's making it uniquely their own, in a dynamic where this performative porn comes into play, that is it's utterly destroyed. I think one could argue it's in many ways, because it isn't consensual, it is raped out of existence. I know that's strong language, but that opportunity for the relationship doesn't ever have a chance to grow. And tragically, even with healing and growth over time, which again, the relationship can make a not just a full recovery as far as having a great relationship and moving forward, and in some ways maybe even being stronger than ever, that innocence component, you can't bring that back.
Now why do we say that? We used to say, well, Mark and Steve, then what's the point? Why would we even try if any of this has happened? We hit this hard, especially for guys who struggle with this, because we want to get a strong message to you. Please stop the damage.
Yeah.
Stop. Get the help you need. Go and get the resources you need to stop the abuse, the betrayal, the head-on collisions in this relationship over and over again. It needs to stop, right? You can. There's great healing to happen here. Steve and I are both absolute evidence in our relationships that this healing and this turnaround and moving forward to grow into something really beautiful and sacred, right? While we can't regain what was lost in the past, we can create what we desire going forward.
Yeah.
So this coupleship has that opportunity. Steve, you and I have taken coupleships through that for the last 20 years. We say this starkly so that guys will take it serious and stop the damage, and partners will begin to find their voice and set boundaries and stand up. But we also have great hope for what can happen here from the healing and the reunification process. If this couple, I don't know if this coupleship plans to get back together. She talks about a separation, but if they at least have that possibility, there are a few things as we close up that need to be happening. We hope that separation is not just you move out and let's just not see each other. We hope the separation is what we call a therapeutic separation, where there's a purpose behind it. There are goals, there's a vision, there's step-by-step benchmarks, there's boundaries, and that this has professional oversight. Because we see separations, but when they're not a quote therapeutic separation, they often don't achieve what people hope they will. So therapeutic separation would be the first thing that we would point out.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of components to that, right? If this couple were to elect to get back together, and again, that's a big if, but as we kind of wrap up here on the world's most on PBSE's most positive episode ever, if we were to kind of look at that, I mean, first and foremost, you'd have to take this, as Mark mentioned, you'd have to take this separation as it's happened now and make it into a therapeutic, professionally guided one. Too often when couples are apart, even though they do that with the best of intentions, the separation is not therapeutic, in that we're just kind of taking a break from one another, which, if not guided properly, oftentimes is just a really long process to ending the relationship, which may be what they're wanting. But again, if there's any hope for this, and if they're wanting to move it forward, then there'd be a couple of things that would need to happen, right, for that to occur. So there needs to be that therapist would need to jump in really quickly to create some really clear dialogue about boundaries, expectations, needs going forward for both partners in the relationship. They would rapidly, quicker than, especially in this dynamic, because it's been a year already, there needs to be a serious discussion about both partners and their need and or capacity to make commitments around those boundaries and expectations, and if that's even achievable or wantable desirable, wantable. And then also along with that, there need to be benchmarks for what that looks like. How does that progress? And there needs to be a check-in process, a collaboration process between them and the therapist in making that happen. And if those commitments aren't met or kept, especially given the length of time here, the nice thing about an approach like this is even though it's a lot of work, it will at least move the relationship forward and keep it from being stuck. Because really quickly, you're going to see if the relationship is going to sink or swim, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, when you start to get real with real commitments, benchmarks, boundaries, consequences, right? Day to day actual actions taking place, not just words, but the doing, and that's being tracked and monitored and, professionally overseen. Now we can see if this relationship can make it. Right?
And if it's compatible and if they're wanting to make it compatible.
Yeah.
And then, so either that's going to happen, or then at that point, then that would be when we'd be looking at, well, possibly we need to end or terminate this relationship. Right. And of course, that's never Mark and Steve's goal. Our Dare to Connect, as we often joke around, is Dare to Connect, not Dare to Divorce. We're not fans of that, but the only thing worse than a separation occurring long-term or a termination of relationship is one or both people being stuck where they can't be authentic, can't be real, and can't progress.
Yeah.
So...
Now, so closing, we want to leave on a note of hope.
As it occurs to us as we are looking at this, that the outline we made for today's podcast may not have been the most positive we've ever done.
Well, we wanted to hit it hard, but you're looking at two guys, and if our wives were here with us, they will tell you that we brought all this garbage and baggage and all this stuff into the relationship. And it was very tough and a very hard road to heal and progress. But if you look at us today, my wife and I like to say, we are so welded, we are so connected that you could drop a nuclear bomb on the two of us today and we would not come apart, right? That relationship weld with all we've been through is ironclad. Now we work on it every day. But we have wonderful intimacy for all of the 8 areas. But our sexual relationship is is beyond what I ever dreamed it could be. I never even knew that you could be in that place where it was so holistic and so collaborative and so connecting. So we don't want to give any message that you can't come through this and move beyond it, to really amazing places, because you can.
Absolutely. But it does take real work and real commitment. And we appreciate this partner's vulnerability. We appreciate all of you who are doing the hard. That's a good way to say it. We really do have a sincere love for all of you. For those who haven't checked it out yet, we would invite you to come check out our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples. If you like the podcast now on its 301st episode, you'll love Dare to Connect. You can grab a 2-week free trial for that. We have that as an ongoing offer at daretoconnectnow.com. And we hope to see you there, or you are always welcome to send us podcast topics to that same website, daretoconnectnow.com. Click on the logo up at the top for PBSE, and that'll take you to a contact form where you can send that to us. We are on a bit of a backlog for those, but we do always get to those as well.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks for being with us, and hope to see some of you in D2C, and if not, in our next PBSE episode.
Awesome. Have a great day, guys.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants, and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.